I want to talk to you about crime, everybody, because it used to be, didn't it, if you do your crime, you do your time. That's all well and good, but not if you actually don't manage to get caught, because apparently now, irrespective of the length of potential punishments, it's not a deterrent because people sit there and think, actually, I'm not going to get caught anyway, so why worry myself? Personally, William, I am a fan of longer deterrents and harsher deterrents, actually, prison sentences. I would make prison a really uncomfortable, unpleasant place that people really would do anything to avoid returning to. At the moment, I do not think that is the case. Where do you stand on it?
Broadly where you are. I wouldn't make it unnecessarily uncomfortable, but I think the
You wouldn't make prison unnecessarily uncomfortable?
I think the purpose of prison is to protect the public. So I'm looking at protecting victims here. And the Sentencing Council says that there's a poor relationship between long sentences and criminality. And they've put some quite convincing reasons why that's the case. I mean, one of them is that they say that a lot of criminals have low self-control, which is true, and they're very impulsive. That's true. And also a lot of the criminals don't know that they might get a slightly longer sentence. But the base fact is that only 5% of these crimes are solved, and that's the basic problem. But I take your point. I mean, I think there is I would argue a logical flaw, actually, in the Sentencing Council's report. They say that longer sentences don't protect the public. Well, they do while the criminal is in jail, surely. I mean,
yeah, but I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you on this process, on your thought process that actually prison is to protect the public. Yeah. To me, prison is to punish the criminal.
It's both. It's both. But I mean, I think the prime thing is to protect the public. The prime thing is to keep dangerous people away from society. Yes, of course, it should be a punishment, and being locked up in a cell is a punishment. I wouldn't bring back the workhouse or anything. I think there's no. I don't think that serves anything. I don't think that would rehabilitate people. But I am in favour of longer sentences. If you read, there are many cases where people have done very, very serious things. The sentences are inadequate, and they get early release, which is not acceptable. So you need as much prison space as you have violent and difficult criminals. That's what you need.
Where do you stand on this, Susie?
I think, look, we're seeing less crimes being solved, and I just don't think it's rocket science. I think it's because this Conservative government have cut 20,000 police officers. Again, you can talk to... I've got friends that are police officers. You can talk to police officers and they'll say, like, what has happened... So many police don't want to be policemen anymore because of the conditions of being a police officer. So I think, number one, we need to see investment in police so that they can actually solve crimes. But also, I've worked with young people. I've worked with young people that are involved in criminal activity. And I do think it's absolutely right that if someone commits a crime, that they go to prison. However, there are lots of things we can be doing in society to prevent people from committing crime, i.e. we used to have way more youth workers. We used to have way more youth clubs. We used to have youth mentors. We used to have way more sport in the community. If you strip back those things, there is going to be an effect. Now, if you're from a more privileged background, which I've got nothing against, because in some ways I'm from a more privileged background, but if you're from a more privileged background, maybe mummy and daddy can pay for you to go to football classes and blah, blah, blah. But if you're not, then let's be honest, these kids are roaming around the streets. They haven't got loads to do. Maybe they've got difficult home lives. And I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I'm saying, you read any criminologist's report on these things, and there's certain factors that often lead to criminality in young people. And either we say, well, let's just dust our hands of all of them, or we say, actually, the next Alan Sugar could have been one of those kids, but we just decided to leave them on the scrap heap of life and not invest in their lives. So for me, it's a bigger picture, but I'm happy to say a bigger picture because I believe in a Labour government. And if we had a Labour government, I believe the landscape of this country would look completely different. And as I say, part of it is investing in police, but part of it is investing in preventative measures.
William, you want to come back in?
I partly agree with the point about resources and the number of police, but I only partly do because part of this is to do with the actual... we've had a habit of this programme of going back in time a little bit. A lot of this is to do with family breakdown and loss of common life. Honestly, those are the core causes. And then the police are having to deal with massive, waves of crime. I'll give you some stats. In the 30s, nationally, there were only 400 street robberies. In London boroughs, the number of street robberies per year can be 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 per year. And you can say, let's have a few more policemen, but that is a weight of crime that they're really struggling to deal with. And so I would say until we are serious, until we start sticking up for the family and social discourse, and also be honest about the real causes, kids that go around stabbing each other are much more likely to not have a father in the house.
I know,
let's be honest about it. It's not all resources.
Well, can I be honest? I get a little bit tired, actually, of people making very poor choices in their life. Because let's face it, if you choose to put a knife down your own pants and go wandering the streets and think that actually I am entitled to steal your iPhone, I'm entitled to whip your watch off your hand, I'm entitled to nick your car, they are proactive choices. And unless you are an incredibly stupid person, then you know that is wrong what you're doing. And whilst I'm appreciating what you're both saying, and I think I agree with the sentiment to a degree, why is there not enough focus on these people's choices that they are proactively making?
OK, so it's really funny because I have these debates with my friends all the time, but I am someone that has worked for 20 years with young people in one of the poorest areas in this country, and I've seen both sides of this. You know, I've been a victim of crime before, and it makes me very angry and very upset, and, you know, call the police and nothing has happened, etc. So I understand that, and I'm not saying that we're not tough on crime, as someone once said. Absolutely right to be tough on crime. By the way, as a side factor, the courts are in a mess. Courts in absolute disarray. Talk to any lawyer in this country. Why is that? Again, because our government, this Tory-led government, hasn't properly invested in courts, hasn't properly invested in legal aid and all these things. So, number one, things aren't properly being dealt with in the courts. Number two, as we've already said, we've got cuts to police. But you're not answering my question at all. I will now answer your question. You're saying about people making poor decisions.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yesterday, I was with one of my old young people whose brother is in prison for stabbing someone. So I said to him, OK, what happened? Because I used to work with his little brother, this is, say, 10 years ago. And basically, he was just like, some boys were basically threatening him and saying they were going to stab him. In the end, he had to carry a knife to defend himself. And don't get me wrong, still a silly decision. I would never pull a knife on anyone. I would never carry a knife. But do you know what? I wasn't born in a family where I had no dad, where my mum had a stroke when I was 12 years old, where we had went to a school where, do you know what, before you even walk through the gate, you know you're going to get crap GCSEs, and then you can't get a job. You get a job, actually, in 2008, and then the economic crisis happens and you lose your job, and then you have very little confidence to get another job. Like, what I'm saying is, we're all sitting here, we all have a job, we all have that security. Certain people live certain lives, and yes, there are always choices, but I think if they've had 50 things already against them, I think it's very difficult for us to sit here and judge them. Now, don't get me wrong.
It's not difficult for me to sit here and judge those people, because I had a life not too dissimilar to the ones that you're describing. And I made different choices to pretty much every single person that I associated with on the council estate that I used to hang around with. My partner was in and out of prison. My weekends were spent visiting him in and out of prison. I made a decision. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult. I didn't have this privilege. I made a choice, and I just get sick and tired of constant excuses for these people who proactively choose to be wrong-uns.
Yeah,
I do.
But I get that. I think that's fair enough. And you could actually, it's a perfectly respectable position to say, what is the cause of crime? The cause of crime is the criminal's choice to do the crime. You know, that's on one level, on an individual level, that's true. But I think all of this, I would say our society is doing as well as a society could do, that's got rid of 4 on 40 wages. You know, in the 60s and 70s, you could raise a family of 4 on 40 hours of an industrial wage. You can't do that now, so the economy's gone wrong. The foundation of society is the family, and we've also, just to throw another thing in, we also lost our religious belief largely. We don't go to church anymore. I'm not a believer, but I'm just making the point that people wonder why all this is happening, and the foundations that used to support our society aren't there anymore. And so we build those literally from the foundations up, we're going to have the same problem.
I don't really need to wind up. I just really need to say I completely respect where you're coming from, because I understand, like you, I was also born on a cancer estate. My mum, you know, came from a very naughty background and was in a gang, but then turned her life around. She's now a church leader. So I agree, it is all about choices. So you are right. I think what I'm trying to say is these things are complex. We do need to have tough sentences. We do need to have more police. But we also need to acknowledge kind of what you're saying.
Honest about the foundations.
Social fabric, things like even investing in sport. This is not a left-wing idea. This is an idea about potential, about the fact that kids are gifted, whether you're from Eton or Poplar. But if you go to Eton, you get, you know, a private school that invests in your life and you get to go to a sports club. If you're born in Poplar, maybe you don't get that, and especially if you're a girl, you know? So what I'm saying is part of being, I would say, proud of living in this country, part of being proud of, like, this country is that we invest in people's lives, whether you're from Poplar or Eton. And that's what's not happening. And I'm saying there's a direct correlation between that and levels of crime.
Well,
but it is not the only answer.
Do you agree? Tell me your thoughts on that. Am I being a bit harsh when I say basically make your choices better? What do you think to the concept of actually if we invest more in youth clubs and activities and all the rest of it, perhaps family units, as William was just saying, does it all boil down to that? Give me your thoughts, GBviews at gbnews.uk.